Bill Turro, congratulations on your third Emmy nomination, this time for your editing on Orange is the New Black. Tell us about the morning of the announcement.
It's a pretty boring story because this is the third time. The first two times are funnier stories, actually. That was when I was on Weeds, and both times I had people call me and say congratulations, and I said, for what? This time I have to say, I figured out the process. So this time I had actually looked, I was aware of the day when the announcement was made, and I had actually looked at around 7 o'clock in the morning, and my looking preceded the congratulations by about 5 minutes. So having had it happen, but the first two times was funny, just out of the blue. Congratulations. For what?
For what? Yes, that's cool. So it took you 3 Emmy nominations to finally understand how it works. That's good. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I realized, oh, I can check.
Absolutely. And so you're nominated in that category along with 2 of your fellow editors on the show, as well as editors from Portlandia and from Modern Family. Have you seen the episodes that are going up against you in this category?
I haven't seen the particular episode of Modern Family, but I've seen, naturally, the other 2 episodes of Orange, and I've seen the episode of Portlandia.
And why did you decide to submit Tit Punch? The episode, I think it's episode 3 or 2. Yeah. Why did you do that?
I mean, I cut the pilot as well, and I think because I kind of feel like what Genji is doing is writing a great, sprawling, epic novel, that Tit Punch is really the second chapter of the pilot, in a way. Having cut the 2 of them, one flows right into the other, and what intrigued me a lot about episode 2, episode 1 it gets Piper into the prison, and we learn of Piper's expectations for prison, her sort of delusions about what life is going to be like in prison. You know, I'll have time to read all the books I haven't read. I'll exercise and get ripped like Jackie Warner, she tells her boyfriend, played by Jason Biggs, in the pilot. But in episode 2, well, at the end of the pilot, she commits a massive faux pas by insulting Red's cooking, Red played by Kate Mulgrew. And episode 2 picks up after that, and what intrigues me about the episode is it's now Piper's up against the reality of prison. And it's not what she expected, it's worse than she expected, and her coping mechanisms that she thought would help her get through it are not working. And it has a lot of humor because of that. She's coming up against a system that works in ways she can't understand, can't fathom, and she keeps putting one foot wrong after another. And I also like that it's basically a quest story, because Red says to her, she tries very directly to apologize to Red. She says, people make mistakes, they say stupid things, I'll apologize to her. Well, Red listens to her apology, and you think maybe Red's going to be sympathetic. She says, you seem like a nice girl, honey, but I probably can't say the word, I can't do squat with I'm sorry. And Piper says, well, what do you want? And Red says, figure something out. And the whole episode is about Piper figuring out how to get back in Red's good graces and to get fed. And in the course of that, there's a lot of humor in the episode. And another thing to remember is it's the episode that introduces all of the characters. We meet some of them in the pilot, but basically the remainder of the cast appears for the first time in episode 2. Tasty, Sophia, Norma, it goes on and on. Poussey, Flocka, they're all coming into the story. Bennett's and Dayanara's flirtation begins in that episode. There's just a lot of fun material in it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the way you're really painting it is that it's really a continuation of the pilot. Because I tell you what, if you had submitted the pilot, that would have been a really easy nomination. Pilots are generally nominated for first-year shows. That's what voters tend to gravitate towards. But you took a gamble on Tit Punch. It is probably, as you say, a extension of the pilot. It does introduce a lot of characters, and of course, it's also very much focused on the backstory of Red.
Yes.
a beautiful backstory that Kate Mulgrew really knocks out of the park. She spoke at length about that yesterday with us in another interview we had with her, and she was, just so happy about how it turned out and about how it portrays how much of an outsider she was and how that really has turned on its head when she's in prison. I'm wondering what part of Red's backstory did you find the most interesting to cut together?
Her vulnerability. What I really like is that the flashbacks are always bumping up against the Red in the present that we see, who seems full of steel and just cool and in control, and she's got her dominion in the kitchen, and she's got her acolytes who work for her. And what's really nice to see in the flashbacks, we see a vulnerable person who's being urged by her husband to make friends with women because he thinks he's got a business relationship with their husbands, and he wants to further things for both of them. And he says, go talk to them, make friends with them. And she tries genuinely to do it, and she is really wounded by them. And we don't ever see that side of her now in prison. And it's really clear that she's someone who was bullied, and now that she's in prison, she's decided, I'm never going to be bullied again. And that's the part of the story that I love. And yet you do see the vulnerable side of her in the present when no one is looking. There's a wonderful moment where she's actually gone to find Healy, played by Michael Harney, in the bathroom. He's on the toilet, and happens after the prison freezer breaks in the kitchen. And she says, I need a new freezer. And he says, I'll think about it and whatever. And she crosses out, and she passes Nick Sandow, Caputo, in the hallway outside the bathroom. And she says, basically it smells like something died in there. And he says, or maybe just somebody who eats your food. And as she walks down the hallway from him, she turns around and she says, "Ach, you too," but "Ach to you too." But most importantly, the expression on her face is once again the wounded person. Sorry, big truck passing, a lot of construction going on here. I'm in the middle of Hollywood. There's a giant pit over there. But anyway, again, you see that flicker on her face of the woman who was put upon and insulted, and she's determined never to be again, which is why Piper's saying the food in here is terrible, sets off this whole chain of events.
Yeah, it's so critical. That particular scene especially, she did so beautifully. But what I'm always curious about when I talk to editors in particular is that a lot of us, lay people don't necessarily understand the art of editing. I mean, obviously, when a movie or a TV show is edited in such a way that, the really showy editing with lots of jump cuts and things like that, you can obviously see it. But when a show is edited seamlessly and you don't necessarily notice what you're watching, it's really important for people to realize that the storytelling doesn't just come from the director, the writer, and the actor. The editor has a lot to do with it because you're picking the shots that are going to obviously resonate with the audience. And I'm wondering if you can give us an example from that episode, either from the flashbacks or from the prison scenes, where you made a very conscious decision to pick certain shots that you thought would enhance the story.
Yes, I mean, I also have to give credit to the director of this episode, Uta Brieswitz, if I'm saying her name correctly. Really did a fantastic job, and this was a very early episode, and gave me lots of angles and choices. But one thing I really loved about this episode was how many scenes there are, and it's not something I really even consciously was aware of so much at the time, but I am now reflecting on it. There are a lot of scenes that are purely visual storytelling. They're beautifully written, but they have no dialogue. A good example being, there are multiple examples, and that for an editor is really fun because it's pure visual storytelling. It's just film grammar being used to tell the story. And a good example of that might be, there's a wonderful scene where Piper is in prison with Alex, her former girlfriend, who at the end of the pilot, she realizes is in the prison with her, and she holds her responsible for being, Piper holds her responsible for being in prison and doesn't want to have anything to do with her. There's a great scene in the cafeteria where Alex surreptitiously slips Piper some cornbread wrapped in a napkin, and throughout the whole scene, again, Udo had lots of setups on the scene, lots of angles, but what was really fun for me was to get the rhythms right. Piper walks in, we see that Crazy Eyes is sitting at an adjacent table, and she registers Piper and is watching what she's doing. We, by the way, have met Crazy Eyes. By this, she appears for the first time in this episode. She's interested in what Piper is up to because she's interested in Piper. So Piper comes in, Crazy Eyes is watching her, Piper sits down. From deep focus in the background, we see a figure approaching, and we realize it's Alex, and she slips her the cornbread. And she goes and sits down, and it's all about the rhythms of the shots. Piper turning to look at Alex, Alex looking back at Piper. Also, in the midst of this scene, Norma, who is an acolyte of Red's in the kitchen, she saw what happened. So she's watching to see if Piper's going to break the code. And Piper slowly opens the cornbread. There's a moment of her just wanting it real bad, but I'm not going to accept it from Alex. I'm not going to do this. She gets up. She goes to the trash can. I think I held a beat on her looking at Alex, Alex looking back at her expectantly, and bam, she drops it into the trash and goes back and sits down with a very rigid back. And it's actually a great shot because it's actually from Alex's perspective of Piper literally turning her back to her, and it ends with Norma sort of nodding to herself and going back to eating. Okay, Piper didn't violate the code. And it's important that we register Norma registering it, because later on that's going to have repercussions for Alex, because Alex violated the rules. And I guess basically I'm just sort of laying out, it's one of the reasons people don't understand editing is editing is not something that's easy to describe unless you were to sit behind me and watch.
See it.
But that episode is a good example of editing is rhythm, and it's rhythm of speech as well as imagery. The particular scene that I'm describing has no dialogue whatsoever, and it's almost musical. You have to hit the right notes, meaning the right expressions from the right performer at the right moment to tell the story, and it's making a composition out of expressions and the direction of gaze, and when people are talking. Again, it's rhythm. What's more important, the person speaking, what they're saying? Is it more important to be on them, or is what they're saying more important to the person listening? And then you split. Maybe the person starts to say it, and we already know what the person's going to say, so you cut to the person listening because the person receiving the information. That's where the story is. I always think editing is about constantly. I'm chasing the story. I'm always wanting to put the viewer in a place where they're watching the story, just tracking the emotion, the tension, the meaning, all of those flickering things that are happening all the time. And that, I guess, makes editing a very difficult thing to describe to people.
Yeah, it's so fascinating though, because it doesn't sound easy. It really doesn't. And which brings me to this. I've got two more technical questions for you. And the first one is, do you ever, because I mean you've been editing for a very long time, and you've worked on a number of shows which we'll talk about in a moment, but are you ever presented sometimes with not enough coverage or not enough shots? Perhaps maybe it just wasn't a well-directed episode. You don't have to obviously name one, but I mean, does it ever happen where you really have to kind of wing it and do your best with perhaps material that could have been better put together?
Yes, I don't think there's any editor who would be honest. Any editor who's being honest with you in the course of, and I've been editing for more than 20 years. Absolutely. I'm grateful to say that hasn't happened on this series, but certainly in the course of my career there have been times when you find yourself thinking, I almost can't get from here to there. Without mentioning what the series was, here's a funny example. It was a first-time director, and there was a scene it took place in Hawaii, and it was a funeral. and the director had covered groups of people at basically like the reception after the funeral or whatever, and he covered one group and another group with nothing to connect it. It was like there was a gap basically, and I thought, it's a Hawaiian funeral. We had stock footage of a canoe going out over the waves because they were going to bury the body at sea, and I was never more grateful to be able to cut to a stock shot of a canoe in the ocean. Because it was as though he failed to one principle of directing and editing is overlapping action. In order to be able to get from A to B, you need you need the material to carry you across, and there actually was a gap in the story. The flip side of that is you can also get shows where there's a lot of material, where they shoot a lot of material, but it's not shot with a lot of intention behind it, and that's what editors can call hosing it down. And that's the opposite issue, where cameras are pointed at the action, and people said everything they were supposed to say while cameras rolled on them, but the cameras aren't placed optimally, the angles aren't particularly thoughtful. Maybe they're at a certain point it would be nice to go from an over the shoulder and then move into a tighter shot, or to dolly or something. And so lots of times editors are behind the scenes should be winning awards for shows. They should be winning awards for shows that are less heralded, because they're doing an incredible amount of work on things that aren't as applauded.
Yeah, totally get that. That's really fascinating. The third question I had on this side of it is, given that Orange is the New Black really does go between drama and comedy, it's dramedy, a lot of people want to call it, but it is at its heart, a comedy, and that's where it is at the Emmys. When you're cutting for comedy, is there anything in particular that you're doing? Or is it really, it doesn't matter what genre you're cutting, it's still all about the story? Like, I'm just wondering if comedy makes things different when you're editing.
I think I cut for the story all the time, because I try to approach everything from character and reality, and I don't want to force I mean, when you've got scripts like these and performers like these, they're not angling for laughs. They're playing these characters. The situations are funny. Their responses to them are funny. So I don't think I approach the comedy or the drama differently. I try to make the two seamless, in fact, because we often turn from one to the other very quickly. And one of the things I love about working on Jenji Kohan's shows is she's so brilliant at embracing everything. I've talked to her about this. I like that she approaches things the way we approach life. It's not like we set out in the morning I'm going to have a funny day today, or today I'm going to be very serious. It's all mixed up. That's what makes life what it is. It's just it's a blend of the good and the bad happening sometimes right next to each other. And I love that, just like in life, your response very often to really dark things can be to laugh, or to find the humor, or the expression "you just gotta laugh" exists for a reason. It's in a way it's an expression of the best part of human nature, and I think Genji is a humanist, and I'm grateful to be working for someone who creates this kind of world, because it's the kind of thing I really enjoy and want to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think that there is a theme with a lot of the shows that you've worked on over your career, because Weeds and The United States of Tara and Murder, She Wrote, Charmed even, they all have kind of dark, they're all dark material generally, but they have a lot of light moments that kind of levitate them off this very dark, deep subject matter. And I'm wondering if that with that common theme, do you have a particular highlight, putting Orange is the New Black aside for a moment, do you have a highlight from your career so far in terms of what you've edited?
It would have to be Weeds. For me, Weeds changed my career really. Working with, uh, I remember the very first my very first episode of Weeds. I started on season 2. I had been working on another series at NBC when Weeds started, and I had been approached about working on Weeds from the beginning, but I felt loyal to the show that I had been on, but I had kind of reached the end of wanting to be there. And at the beginning of season 2, when asked again, I said, where do I sign, basically, and went and met Genji and started, and that was in 2006. And I have a memory very distinctly of an evening when I was editing a scene, my very first episode of Weeds, where Mary Louise Parker was sitting with Martin Donovan, who played her soon-to-be husband, who was a DEA agent who she started to dating, and then realized, holy crap,
Oh no.
I'm sleeping with a DEA agent. And she tells him she can't see him. She goes out and sits with him in his truck in front of her house and says, "Look, I have to break this off. I lost my husband. I worry." Basically, she's lying. I told you we have to break this off. And he turns to her and says, "I know you're a drug dealer." And she had about 18 or 25 micro expressions, all passing over her face in an instant before she dashed from the car and threw up. But I remember that night working in my editing room and thinking, these are wonderful actors. I think Mary Louise Parker is brilliant and was brilliant in Weeds, and I basically felt that thing you want to have in your career, where you're just like riding a wave, and I thought, I felt like I've come home. I'm doing what I've wanted to do my whole life, and I've told Genji that she's given me the best jobs I've ever had, because this is the kind of material I've always wanted to do. You bring up Murder, She Wrote. That was, I just want to remind people, it ran until 1996.
Yeah.
I worked on it I edited on it from 93 to 96. But on film, I edited the very last television show ever to post on film on a moviola. And the funny thing about a show like that was, even then, occasionally a guest actor on Murder, She Wrote would come in, and they would be bringing a performance that was pitched to a realer reality than the show generally took place in. And I would always notice that, and I would think, this person is reacting to this sort of standard scene the show would have where Angela would explain everything. I would see the actor over there who's playing it actually grieving, and I would think, I'm gonna try to showcase that a little bit, because this actor is taking this sort of standard scene that we did, in which the fact that we're talking about a death, and it was really just Colonel Mustard with the lead pipe.
Yeah, exposition. Yeah.
And that was, so from the very beginning, I was always looking for that kind of thing, and you can always in my career, I was looking for, in every scene, no matter what I've been working on, I was looking for the kernel of something true, or something beautiful, or something surprising, even in things that I was working on that were, sort of silly, or not as, not as highly regarded, but were entertaining people. And I can think of examples in everything I've done where I would find that for myself, find a moment and think, I'm going to just see if I can burnish this a little bit and make a moment of it. I guess enough of my...
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Final question for you is this. Most people say that it's an honor to be nominated, and it absolutely is, because just to get into that field is very difficult. There's a lot of people on the ballot, a lot of editors. And you've been nominated twice before, so you've been here, you've done that. I'm wondering what that period between Emmy nomination morning and the Creative Arts Emmys, what is that like? Because you must be riding this really lovely wave of, I'm in that club, I've been nominated, no, there's no winners, there's no losers. What is that feeling like until the very night when you find out who wins the trophy?
Well, I think you put your finger on something with the, like there's no winners and no losers. It is a nice period because you can, especially here because there are three of the editors from our show, Michael Stern and Shannon Mitchell and myself, and on that morning we were all texting each other, and this is a really good group of people, and we're all happy for each other, and I think it is a nice period in between, and as the evening approaches, it is nice to be nominated. But I think everyone also, you'd be kidding to say that you wouldn't want to actually have it happen,
Of course.
But at the same time, the good thing for me is we're already working. I'm in my office right now, and this is my editing system right here. Oops, I unplugged. Sorry, and I don't have any charge in my battery. I'm at work here, and I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
Can't seem to. Oh, there we go. Anyway,
What are you working on today?
I'm working on Orange, which is over here. I put the.
Oh wow.
I put the only thing I could put in the screen.
That's great. No spoilers.
That's Genji's title card.
Yeah.
I realized, and this is right here. Not very good with the camera. There's a script. I don't think you can read it.
No, read it.
There's my keyboard, and there's this is the source and record side, but I've carefully hidden anything of any interest to your viewers because we're working on season 3, and I am grateful for that because the morning that the announcement came out, I had to go to work, and I had dailies to cut.
Yeah.
And that I think is kind of a saving grace. And the one thing I just want to say that I left out in response to your question about choosing this episode, which is really personal, is my mother passed away a week and a half before I cut this episode, and so I was basically grieving the entire time that I was working on this, and I feel when I watch it, I feel that she was with me, and that's just something. I mean, that's sort of this episode is very special to me because when you're editing, you're alone in a room, but I don't feel like I was on this particular one. So anyway, that's
lovely. Listen, mate, we wish you all the best on Creative Arts Emmy night. Good luck and well done on a very deserving show.
Thank you. It's great to work on, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, just stop.